We all know the headlines coming out of Ukraine, dominated by the conflict. But, what if I told you beneath all those reports, there's this story of immense, often overlooked wealth?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're about to dive deep into Ukraine's vast reserves of critical minerals, a treasure trove, really, that could significantly shift geopolitical power.
It's such a crucial layer to understanding the conflict, isn't it? And one that, like you said, often gets lost in the immediate focus on the human cost.
Right.
But exploring Ukraine's natural resources, it gives vital context for the strategic interests at play and maybe what the long game might actually look like.
Exactly. And to really get a grip on this, we've sifted through, well, quite a range of sources. We looked at what the U.S. State Department likely covers on Ukraine's investment climate, even though their latest statement was a bit elusive, technically. We dug into CRSD analysis on these modern mineral wars.
Right, that's a key one.
Examined a European Parliament briefing, specifically on Ukraine's rare earth potential. Reviewed NATO NSIC COE's overview of critical materials. Tracked mining sector shifts via Discovery Alert. Dissected Al Jazeera news reports on this very recent U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal. And even scanned, the diverse reactions bubbling up on Reddit.
That's a really robust set of perspectives, essential, I think, for navigating such a multifaceted issue. It lets us appreciate everything from the raw geology to the intricate details and, like you said, the public responses around this new agreement.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
We want to understand the true scale and significance of Ukraine's mineral wealth, the drivers behind this intense geopolitical interest, especially from the U.S.
Yeah.
The specific details and potential fallout of this newly signed minerals deal, and how it all fits into the broader European picture, particularly with the EU and Russia. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with just the sheer magnitude of Ukraine's mineral riches.
Well, to begin, it's vital to recognize Ukraine's standing before the war. This wasn't just any country. It really held the status of a genuine critical minerals powerhouse.
Right.
Even before the 2022 invasion, Ukraine had something like 20,000 registered deposits with over 8,700 proven reserves.
Wow.
And what's truly remarkable is the sheer variety. These include 117 of the 120 most globally used metals and minerals.
That's an astonishing figure. So beyond just quantity, what specifically makes Ukraine so strategically important globally?
Okay, several key resources jump out immediately. Ukraine was reported to possess the largest recoverable reserves globally for things like coal, gas, iron, manganese, nickel, ore, titanium, and uranium.
That list, that covers so much.
Just take a moment to consider that list. It touches on pretty much everything from energy production to advanced manufacturing, cutting-edge tech.
Right, the fundamental building blocks for so many industries. And I remember reading something about noble gases, too. Does that play a role?
Indeed it did. Ukraine was also a significant global supplier of noble gases, particularly neon.
Neon, okay.
Now, neon might not be something you think about every day, but it's absolutely critical for making microchips.
Ah, right. Semiconductors.
Exactly. So Ukraine held a really significant position within that global electronic supply chain.
That's a detail that often flies under the radar, I think. What else cements their powerhouse status?
Well, when we look at the clean energy transition, Ukraine is believed to hold the most substantial known lithium and rare earth deposits in Europe.
Lithium. That's huge for batteries.
Massive. The figure of around 500,000 tons of lithium is often cited, which is, considerable. Lithium, as we know, is a cornerstone of EV battery production.
Right.
So think about this. Ukraine's lithium reserves position it as a potential key player in the future of electric mobility, potentially challenging, the current global supply chain.
Okay, so batteries are a big piece of the puzzle. What about other clean energy tech, or say nuclear power?
In the nuclear energy realm, Ukraine has the largest uranium deposits in Europe. It's estimated at about 2% of the world's total.
2%, okay.
And this is crucial not just for nuclear power generation, but increasingly for energy-hungry sectors like AI data centers.
Interesting connection there.
Yeah, and then there's gallium. Ukraine ranks as the world's 5th largest producer, another vital element for semiconductors and LEDs.
It really does paint this picture of Ukraine potentially holding the keys to so many future industries, doesn't it?
It really does.
And I know titanium was mentioned prominently, too.
Yes, titanium is another major asset. Ukraine holds the largest reserves in Europe, accounting for roughly 7% of the global total.
7%.
They were also a significant miner before the war, and titanium is absolutely essential for both aerospace and defense industries.
Critical sectors.
And let's not forget graphite, with Ukraine holding around 20% of global reserves, another critical material for EV batteries.
20% of global graphite. It's almost overwhelming, the sheer number of these vital elements.
Yeah.
Are there any others worth noting?
We also see mentions of other critical materials like beryllium, zirconium, apatite, fluorite, cobalt, each with significant industrial and tech applications.
Right.
And what's also striking, and this is highlighted in the CIRSD analysis and maps from the European Parliament, is the geographical concentration. These resources are largely within the Ukrainian Shield and, significantly, the Donbas region.
Ah, the Donbas.
Yeah. This geographical overlap with the ongoing conflict is, well, it's certainly no accident.
No, it really can't be a coincidence. Which leads us perfectly to the next crucial question. Why this intense geopolitical scramble for these resources? I mean, there's more to it than just goodwill, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
These minerals are strategically vital because of, well, a convergence of major global trends. Firstly, the clean energy transition. It's just generating enormous demand for materials like lithium, graphite, rare earths, for batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, you name it.
Right. The green revolution needs the minerals.
Exactly. Secondly, the tech sector is heavily reliant on elements like gallium and neon for semiconductors, electronics. And we can't ignore defense and aerospace, major consumers of titanium and other specialized metals.
So it's really about securing future supply in a world that's changing incredibly fast. How does Europe fit into this equation?
Europe's position is particularly noteworthy. The European Parliament briefing really underscores the EU's significant dependence on China. Get this. For a staggering 98% of its rare earth import.
98% from China. Wow.
Yeah, think about that. Europe relies on China for almost all its rare earth elements. That's a massive strategic choke point.
Definitely.
So Ukraine, with its significant deposits, suddenly becomes a potential key to unlocking Europe's supply chain independence. And this strategic vulnerability, it was clearly recognized back in the 2021 EU-Ukraine Strategic Partnership on Critical Raw Materials.
Right, trying to lessen that reliance. And the U.S., their interest seems particularly strong, maybe even growing.
The U.S. interest, yeah, as detailed by CIRSD and Al Jazeera, has definitely been growing, particularly during the Trump administration.
I remember hearing things about that.
There was even the suggestion back then of kind of exchanging minerals for security support. Trump himself, in an interview just this past February, mentioned the U.S. potentially receiving $500 billion worth of rare earths.
$500 billion worth. That's an immense valuation.
It is, and it clearly indicates a strategic economic rationale that's deeply intertwined with security considerations.
And it makes you look at Russia's actions on the ground, doesn't it? Their focus on certain territories seems very, very deliberate in terms of resource control.
Precisely. The CIRSD analysis emphasizes that the geographic focus of Russia's occupation efforts is, quote, hardly coincidental.
Right.
The Donbas and Crimea, regions under Russian occupation since 2014, and then the full-scale invasion in 2022, they are incredibly rich in coal, natural gas, and these critical minerals.
So what kind of control are we talking about?
By the end of 2022, Russia controlled a staggering amount of Ukraine's resource wealth. The estimate was over $12.5 trillion worth.
Trillion, with a T.
Trillion, yes. This included over 56% of Ukraine's hard coal, 20% of its gas fields, 11% of its oil fields.
Those are substantial percentages.
Yeah.
And it becomes even more targeted when we look at the critical minerals, right?
Yes. Crucially, by the end of 2022, Russia controlled somewhere between 50 and 100%, a huge range, but significant either way, of Ukraine's reserves of lithium, tantalum, cesium, and strontium.
All vital for green energy and defense.
Exactly, all vital for those sectors. And they also gained control of around 80% of Ukraine's Black Sea gas reserves. The implications are pretty clear. Controlling Ukraine's resources significantly amplifies Russia's potential leverage on global supply chains.
It's almost like controlling the tap for essential future technologies.
Yeah.
And that link between security and minerals, it's becoming increasingly explicit, isn't it? I'm thinking of Senator Lindsey Graham's statements.
Exactly. Senator Graham directly connected providing weapons to Ukraine with securing access to its mineral wealth. It further highlights the strategic calculus at play here. This isn't purely about altruism. There are very tangible economic and strategic interests driving these geopolitical maneuvers.
Which brings us right to the heart of our discussion today. The U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal. signed very recently, April 30th, 2025, and expected to be ratified by Ukraine's parliament, well, today, May 1st. What can you tell us about this agreement?
Well, this deal has certainly stirred up a range of responses. Al Jazeera reported it being hailed by some as a diplomatic win for Ukraine, suggesting it solidifies a long-term U.S. commitment.
Okay, a win for Ukraine from one perspective.
But as Al Jazeera also noted, you had Medvedev quick to dismiss it, basically framing it as Ukraine paying for U.S. aid with mineral resources.
So very different takes.
Very different. This stark contrast really underscores the contentious nature of the whole agreement.
So what's the fundamental structure? How is this deal actually supposed to work?
Okay, the core mechanism is setting up a reconstruction investment fund, and this fund will be jointly managed by both the U.S. and Ukraine.
Jointly managed, okay.
And it's designed to facilitate investment in Ukraine's development, with a particular focus on its natural resource sector.
And how is the fund financed? What are the specific commitments from each side?
Right. Ukraine's commitment involves allocating 50% of the revenues generated from the future monetization, that's the key word, future of its government-owned natural resource assets.
So new licenses, things like that.
Exactly. New licenses for critical materials, oil, gas exploration. But it's important to clarify, and this came up in both Al Jazeera and some Reddit discussions, this does not draw from current budget revenues or serve as repayment for past U.S. aid.
Okay, that's a crucial distinction. It's about future earnings from new ventures. What about the U.S. contribution to this fund?
The U.S. commitment, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Economy, as reported by Al Jazeera, is to contribute either directly to the fund or, interestingly, through new military assistance.
New military assistance, how'd that work?
Yeah. Well, Vice Prime Minister Sverdenko even suggested this could potentially include things like air defense systems.
Yeah.
So there's this direct link being drawn between future mineral revenue and potential military aid.
That's a significant aspect of the deal, isn't it?
It really is.
It sounds like Ukraine did manage to negotiate some key conditions within this framework, though.
Yes, they reportedly secured several important concessions. Prime Minister Shmyhal stated that Ukraine retains full ownership and control over its subsoil, its infrastructure, and its natural resources.
Full ownership.
And critically, there are no debt obligations tied to past U.S. military aid. This addresses some of those initial concerns about, a direct repayment scheme.
However, one notable aspect seems to be the absence of explicit security guarantees in the deal itself, despite Ukraine apparently seeking them initially.
That's a crucial observation, yeah. While the deal aims to grant the U.S. priority access to these resources, presumably as a way to incentivize future U.S. involvement and maybe deter Russia, it doesn't offer formal binding security guarantees. And that was reportedly a point of considerable discussion leading up to the signing.
And understandably so, given the ongoing conflict. The Reddit discussions, in particular, seem to voice pretty significant concerns about the implications for Ukraine's sovereignty.
Yeah, the Reddit threads and even Al Jazeera's reporting, they highlight these worries about the potential impact on Ukraine's economic independence.
How so?
Well, the U.S. co-managed fund raises questions. Could it potentially steer projects towards American firms? Some Reddit users used very strong language, even labeling it a colonial agreement. That reflects some deep skepticism about the long-term implications for Ukraine's autonomy.
Colonial agreement? That's very strong language indeed. And then there's the practical issue of actually accessing minerals in territories Russia currently controls. That seems like a major hurdle.
It's a huge complication. With roughly 40% of Ukraine's metal resources currently under Russian control. That's an estimate from Ukrainian think tanks, reported by Al Jazeera. The actual feasibility of accessing and developing these resources under this deal remains highly uncertain, at least in the short to medium term.
So even with the deal signed, there are still considerable obstacles, lots of unanswered questions. And the ratification by Ukraine's parliament today, it isn't necessarily a slam dunk, is it?
Well, it's expected to pass, but ratification still needs to happen, and it could face some scrutiny within Ukraine's own political landscape. Lawmaker Goncharenko, as reported by Al Jazeera, indicated he'd be closely reviewing the document before voting.
Right.
So that just underscores the internal political dynamics still at play.
It's interesting to bring in Anatol Lieven's perspective here, too. He acknowledges it's not a security guarantee, but he suggests it gives the U.S. a tangible stake in Ukraine's future, potentially acting as a deterrent.
Lavin's point is quite insightful, I think. By establishing this clear U.S. economic interest in Ukraine's future prosperity through the fund, the U.S. might be more inclined, to respond decisively to future threats.
Makes sense.
And as Trump himself reportedly noted, it kind of ensures the U.S. doesn't look foolish for its previous support. It frames it as a strategic economic move with potential returns down the line.
But the big question that still hangs in the air is whether private investors will actually be willing to commit significant capital to Ukraine's mining sector, given all the risks associated with the ongoing war.
That's a critical uncertainty, absolutely. As Lavin pointed out in his analysis for Al Jazeera, the actual investment flowing into these mineral projects will likely be private capital.
Right, not just government funds.
Exactly. And the inherent risks associated with an active war zone could certainly dampen investor enthusiasm, regardless of the potential long-term rewards. It's a big ask.
Let's shift focus just slightly and look at the broader trends within Ukraine's mining sector itself. We saw some interesting data regarding mining income recently.
Yes. Despite all the massive disruptions from the war, the European Parliament briefing and the Discovery Alert analysis both indicate a really notable increase in Ukraine's mining income post-2022.
An increase, even with the war.
Yeah, quite significant. Income apparently more than doubled between 2022 and 2023, reaching something like 262.9 billion UAH.
Wow.
It just highlights the continued economic importance of these resources, even right in the middle of the conflict.
However, that Discovery Alert piece on the nationalization of the Poltava mine, that adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It certainly does. The nationalization of Ferexpo's Poltava mine back in February 2025, which happened amidst significant allegations of corruption, it really illustrates the internal dynamics within Ukraine's mining sector.
Right. Internal factors matter, too.
Exactly. This move by the government to assert greater control over a key asset like the Poltava mine, which holds over 1 billion tons of iron ore reserves, it reflects a broader trend, perhaps, of state intervention in strategic resources during wartime.
So Ukraine's mineral future seems, completely intertwined not just with the war's outcome, but also its own domestic policies and these big international partnerships. Who do you think stands to gain the most in the long run, the U.S. or the EU?
That really is the central question, isn't it? And the European Parliament briefing touches upon this directly. The answer, I think, really depends on future investment strategies, regulatory frameworks, and, as the briefing notes, Ukraine's own geopolitical alignment down the road.
It's not clear-cut.
Not at all. The EU has this clear strategic imperative to diversify its critical mineral supply chains, and Ukraine is geographically such a logical partner.
Right next door, basically.
Exactly. But the U.S. has made a very decisive move with this minerals deal. It's going to be fascinating to watch how these sort of competing interests unfold.
It really highlights a kind of paradox, doesn't it? You have Europe facing this conflict right on its doorstep with profound implications for its own security and economy.
Mm-hmm.
Yet it seems to be relying heavily on external powers like the U.S. to navigate the resource-driven geopolitics at play.
Precisely. The CERSD analysis concludes by emphasizing that very point, this somewhat paradoxical situation of Europe's reliance on external actors to resolve a conflict so central to its own sovereignty and economic interests in this new era of resource politics.
So, to kind of wrap this up, the crucial takeaway seems to be that Ukraine possesses this immense mineral wealth. And it's not just a footnote to the conflict, it's a fundamental underlying factor shaping the entire geopolitical landscape.
Absolutely.
This U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal, it's a significant development aiming to tap into that wealth, but it's clearly not a straightforward solution. It raises really complex questions about Ukraine's long-term sovereignty and who ultimately benefits the most.
Exactly. It really compels us, and you listening, to consider the enduring significance of resource politics in international conflicts, and that delicate balance nations have to strike between attracting foreign investment for growth and safeguarding their national sovereignty over vital assets.
It truly makes you ponder. How might this deal and the underlying mineral wealth it represents shape the trajectory of the war itself and any potential future peace talks? And what role will the EU ultimately carve out for itself in Ukraine's mineral future? Feels like we've only just scratched the surface today.
Indeed. There are so often these hidden layers to global conflicts, things that remain unseen amidst the immediate crisis. Understanding the strategic importance of resources, like those in Ukraine, is absolutely essential to fully comprehending the complexities of the situation and, maybe anticipating what the future might hold.